Hello everyone, my name is Jason, and we're going to be reviewing Villains by Necessity by Eve Forward today. It's an older book. It was printed in '95, so it's a little more than 20 years old. As far as I can tell, Eve Forward didn't write too many books. When I looked up this book to find the cover, I only found one other book by her called Animist. Anyway, this book is one of my favorites. I've read it multiple times, and I actually have multiple copies of the book. What happened was, the first book that I had, the spine broke, and I looked into getting it fixed, but most places were too expensive. It was basically cheaper to get a new copy of the book rather than to have somebody fix the book itself, which kind of was disappointing to me. I had to wait a while because there was a time when this book was you couldn't get it for under $100. It's gone down in price a bit. You can get it on Amazon for around $50. I looked it up today. I don't remember the exact price, but it was in the 40s, high 40s, I believe. Anyway, Villains by Necessity. This has a rather interesting premise. The thing is that a lot of books have follow that same trope of evil is taking over the world. The small band of heroes get together and they go and they vanquish the Dark Lord, Dark Lady, evil god, whatever it happens to be, and the world returns to peace. In this book, that same thing happened, not happens. It happened, and there was a group of adventurers, and they defeated the Dark Lord, but then they decided to take it a step further and eradicate all evil. The Dark Lord was vanquished, and so they decided that they would basically break ties with evil altogether in their world. And they went so far as to find the portal that allowed evil to come into their world, and they sealed it. And so no more evil was allowed to come in. So that meant that when they killed off an evil creature, no more evil creatures of that type could exist. So they went around eradicating everything that was evil. And at the point that you are introduced to the main characters in the book, the first character you're introduced to is Sam. Sam is an assassin, and not necessarily evil, but definitely morally ambiguous. He doesn't necessarily kill for pleasure or because he likes killing people. He kills because it's his job, and he's good at it. Okay, and then you meet R.C. R.C. is the head of the Thieves Guild in this town, and he comes over to the Assassins Guild where Sam is all there by himself being bored, and he comes to gloat because his the Guild of Assassins had already disbanded, with Sam being the only one left, and the Thieves Guild managed to last longer. So he came over to gloat a little bit. Sam and R.C. are friends. And again, R.C.'s not necessarily evil, but he is morally ambiguous. He will steal you blind. He won't kill you, but he will steal you blind. Anyway, they go to have a drink together, and they end up getting caught and put in jail because Sam gets drunk and can't stop R.C. from indulging in a little thievery. So they get put in prison. And that's when the main antagonist of the novel appears. It's the Archmage Mizamir. He's an elf, one of the last elves to live in this world. The rest of the elves kind of decided that since evil was vanquished, they were no longer needed and left. But the Archmage Mizamir, he decided that he was still needed, and it was his job to continue the fight against evil by brainwashing people. He had a special spell that he set up that when they found a villain who was unrepentant and wouldn't change his ways, they would cast this spell on a person and basically mind wipe them and force them to be good. Now, I know you're sitting there thinking, how could a good person do this? And it's like, it is from the best possible motives. He's trying his best to eradicate evil. Anyway, they end up they're in jail. The mage starts his spell, and that's when RC puts a contract on the Archmage, and Sam accepts. And that allows him to kind of tap into his inner strength. He had been manacled to the wall, but there was enough give that he was able to injure himself, but he was able to get out of his bindings and try to kill the Archmage. And it would have gone terribly for our two protagonists, but the guard had a peace knot on his sword, so he couldn't even get it out of the scabbard. So in the process, they leave. They run away. They just can't, at that point in time, get to the Archmage and kill him, which is good because, like I said, he's the main antagonist of this novel. Anyway, they run out into the wilderness. They meet up with a druid. Now, the druids were not good or evil. They were neutral. They tried to maintain the balance between the two opposing factions. In fact, when the Dark Lord was in power, they sided with the heroes, because to them, good and evil were out of balance, and they needed to bring that back into balance. So they sided with the good. They offered them healing. They offered them what help they could to defeat the evil. But once evil was defeated, they said, "Okay, we're done," and they backed off. And they wouldn't help, but they wouldn't hinder either. And so the heroes at that point felt that they were betrayed, and they destroyed the druids. So Kaelana was the last druid, and she recruited RC and Sam to help her basically bring back evil. They didn't know how, but they needed it because, according to Kaelana, the balance being so far to the side of good, the world was in danger of being destroyed. Just as if the balance was too far to the side of evil, the world would be destroyed. They end up meeting 3 other people in this little band of 6. The next one they met was an evil sorceress, similar to a drow. Her people lived underground, and so when she was in the light of day, it burned her, that kind of stuff. She was actually she had in her possession the last of, basically, it was a portal, a very tiny one, that she could use to cast magic. It gave her just enough power to power her spells. And she used this to threaten the group that if they didn't do what she wanted, she would destroy them. They next met up with a dark paladin who basically took a vow of silence. He wouldn't speak, so they ended up calling him Blackmail. Kind of the double entendre there, with his armor being all black and blackmail being something that evil people do. They also end up running into the minstrel Robin. Robin was a centaur, and he was a minstrel. Now, bards don't exist anymore because bards also were they were there to maintain the balance as well. They were on the side of the druids, and so the bards were also exterminated. And so there's this kind of thing going around where anybody mentions bards, he's like, "What is a bard? What are you talking about bards?" Because they've been eradicated. Nobody really knows about them. And the good guys look at him and say, "You're a minstrel? Are you sure you're not a bard?" Because they're thinking, if he's a bard, he might betray us. So he's in there. He's actually he actually is pretty important to the story. Going forward, they find out that what happened was the heroes found this dark gate that allowed evil energy into their world, and this evil energy was opposed by the light gate, which allowed light energy into the world. And the only way that they could actually bring the world back into balance for Kaylana, and for basically for the sorceress, her name was Valeriana, and she very early on said, "My name is not Valerie," and so they called her Valerie, because of course you do. But she wanted revenge, and so she wanted to undo all the work of the heroes. But they needed to find what was called the Spectrum Key, and it had been broken into 6 pieces, and each piece hidden by one of the 6 heroes who defeated the Dark Lord. And then once with the Spectrum Key put back together, they would then be able to open the Dark Gate again and undo the work of the heroes, save the world, what have you. So it's very interesting that these people, they're bad guys, but the good guys can't see that the world is in danger. They just, to them, it's great. There's no bad, there's nothing going wrong, and the heroes are sitting there going, the bad guys are sitting there going, no, the world's way, way bad. The thing is that whether or not the world would be actually destroyed, it's a novel, so it's a book. It has an ending. It's standalone. It's not a trilogy. It's just Villains by Necessity all by itself. But in my opinion, very well worth the read. Very, very good characterizations. Some of the things, though, for me personally, not necessarily. I don't necessarily follow along with the way that she's presented them. I believe personally that a world can be all good. However, I also believe that if you are going to have a world that is all good, there still has to exist the possibility that someone can choose choose to do something bad. I think that in the case of, basically mind wiping people who don't agree with you, that's a terrible, terrible thing. But that you can try to bring them to your side. I believe that everyone should have the ability to choose whether they want to be good or evil. And if they are evil, that you should have the option, the ability, to try to convince them otherwise. Anyway, philosophizing and moralizing apart, there are bands of heroes that they do run into, because the heroes are kind of getting bored too. They're sitting around going, there hasn't been a good evil monster to kill in so long, my skills are getting rusty, kind of thing. And the bad guys are like, this is so boring. Everybody's so good. Nobody, like Sam. There just isn't a demand for people to kill other people. So, very definitely worth the read. I kind of want to find out, what happened before, and even an expansion on what may have happened later. Further adventures from maybe some of these characters in here, because it ends. It has a great ending. It really does. But at the same time, they're left with possibilities and branching storylines that could have been explored. Whether or not we'll get more from Villains by Necessity, I couldn't tell you. Some authors, they write the book and they're done with that world and they move on. Other authors, obviously, they keep going and they bring more and more adventures from that point of view. Peter S. Beagle, who wrote The Last Unicorn, if I remember right, he's kind of one of those authors that writes a book and just doesn't go back, which is why there's never been any more adventures in the Last Unicorn universe. He's done. So anyway, Villains by Necessity is a great read. If you have any questions about it, let me know. Comment, like, subscribe, all that other stuff, and we'll be bringing you another book here shortly.